This program is about paper cutter safety and you. Every year, needless accidents cause operator injuries, many quite serious. And in many cases, someone might have been able to prevent the injuries. Someone like you, a careful, safety-conscious operator.
Not all paper cutter accidents involve operator error, but there is a lot you can do as a careful operator to prevent injury. One of the most important things you can do is learn how and why many cutter-related injuries happen. Paper cutters have changed a great deal over the years as manufacturers tried to improve the safety of their machines. Cutters like this old, mechanically driven flywheel model, state-of-the-art at the time it was manufactured, have given way to today's highly advanced cutters with sophisticated safeguarding features. Old or new, all cutters have one thing in common. They cut with tremendous force. Not even today's state-of-the-art technology can guarantee absolute safety. The absolutely safe paper cutter has not been invented. All paper cutters are potentially hazardous and deserve your respect. Careful attention to safe operating procedures is your best defense against possible injury. Older machines, particularly mechanically driven cutters, are more likely to pose a hazard. Some manufacturers have stopped making them. Many machines which should have been sold for scrap years ago are still being used. Badly worn parts, inadequate maintenance, safety features which have since been improved, and improper changes or modifications all contribute to the dangers of operating old cutters. Depending on age, model, safeguarding features, and general operating conditions of your paper cutter, special precautions may be required of the operator.
Let's look at some of the main causes of paper cutter-related injuries. Usually, a number of factors contribute, involving the operator, the machine itself, and the workplace. A government study of serious machine-related injuries shows that
35% of injuries, 1/3, involved operators with a year or less of experience. There's also another way to look at this statistic. It means that 65% of injuries involved experienced operators. 31% of the injury cases involved inadequate machine maintenance. 20% of the injuries occurred where there were no specific safe operating rules. 27% involved machines more than 30 years old. 13% of the injuries involved 2 operators. And there's one more figure you'll want to remember. 42%, almost half of the studied injuries involved unsafe acts by operators, including attempts to circumvent or get around safeguarding devices.
it would be a good idea for you to make notes throughout this program, which you can review later. And you should view this program again periodically to refresh your memory.
The first important step in paper cutter safety is to know your machine. It's surprising how many experienced operators know very little about the cutter they use every day. And even though you may not be the person responsible for maintenance of the cutter, there are a few things you should know about machine maintenance that are critical to safe operation. First and most importantly, you should never touch or attempt to operate a paper cutter unless you have been thoroughly trained in its safe operation. Instructions for its safe operation are included in your cutter's instruction manual. Before beginning operation, you should carefully read your cutter's instruction manual. You should also know who manufactured the cutter, how old it is the knife mechanically, electrically, or hydraulically driven? Are all the safeguarding devices and controls indicated in the manual on the machine? Have any modifications been made, particularly to safeguarding devices or controls? Who made them, and when?
These may seem like questions that have little to do with cutter operation. If you don't know the answers, however, you may not know enough about the cutter to operate it safely.
If your cutter is an older model, you should contact the manufacturer to obtain safety bulletins, hazard warnings, or manual updates which may have been issued since your cutter was manufactured. If your cutter is old or was purchased second-hand, the manufacturer may not be aware that you own it and won't be able to send important bulletins, warnings, or updates unless contacted by you. Has your cutter been properly maintained according to the manufacturer's instructions? If not, or if you're not certain, ask your supervisor to make a thorough inspection. Under normal operating conditions, the useful life of the average paper cutter ranges from 10 to 15 years. Abnormal operation may reduce a cutter's useful life by many years. Lack of proper maintenance may also reduce its useful life by years. It is known that age wears out any machine. Very careful attention should be paid to maintenance to ensure the machine is in proper working order. Your safety depends on it. In fact, machines which have been in service for 15 years are at or beyond their expected service life and should be replaced with newer models. If this is not possible, the cutter should be disassembled and completely rebuilt by a qualified technician prior to further use. Beyond the important consideration of safety, today's advanced paper cutters, particularly some of the new machines with computer-driven spacers, offer much higher productivity than most older machines. Many critical parts on machines older than 10 years, particularly parts on non-hydraulically driven cutters, may visibly appear to be in good condition. They may actually be on the verge of failure. While performing maintenance may not be your job, your safety depends on how well others maintain the cutter for you. As the operator, you have the final responsibility for cutter safety. If you're not certain the machine is in good, safe operating condition, don't turn it on.
It won't be possible to talk about every type of cutter and every type of hazard in this program. We'll review some of the main causes of cutter-related injuries to help you become familiar with them and to help you avoid becoming an injury statistic.
The knife and clamp have been known to cause many injuries. The knife is designed to cut materials. It is sharp and can cause serious injury. The clamp is designed to securely position and hold materials in place while the blade cuts. It too can cause serious injury. Remember, your safety depends on proper operation of the cutter, including making sure your hands are always free of the knife and clamp area. This means, for safety, you should never place hands, fingers, or other parts of your body under the knife or clamp, even when they're locked in place, or when the cutter is off. Many new machines with automatic or computer spacers will push the lift out for you, removing any need to put your hands in the danger zone under the knife and clamp. There are cases in which knives and clamps have been activated by themselves without warning. Badly worn, overaged parts are one of the main causes of self-activation. If your cutter is an older model, or if it has been abnormally used or poorly maintained, you should be alert for self-activation. The knife and clamp could be activated themselves without your ever touching the controls. It can and does happen. On some cutter models, an electrical ground fault can activate the clamp without warning. In short, there is no time when you can assume it is safe to put any part of your body under the knife or clamp, or where you could be injured by unexpected movement of the knife and clamp, even when the cutter is turned off. Anti-repeat devices are another cause of possible injury, particularly on mechanically driven cutters. These devices are intended to prevent the knife, or the knife and clamp in combination, from proceeding through more than one cutting cycle. Don't rely on the existence of an anti-repeat device, particularly on older machines with worn parts. Check your instruction manual to find out what type of anti-repeat device is on your cutter. If you observe the knife or knife and clamp continue downward movement after completing one cutting cycle, stop the cutter at once and take the machine out of service until it can be properly repaired or replaced. Under no circumstances should you operate a cutter with an anti-repeat device that has been known to fail. Knife overtravel is another hazard to look for on paper cutters. The knife should never come to rest below the bottom of the clamp. If it does, it may be over-traveling, a severe hazard. The clutch or braking mechanism may be out of adjustment, or they may be on the verge of complete failure. If over-travel occurs on a mechanically driven cutter, the knife is often stopped and held only by the safety shot or latch pin, which is a backup safety feature, not a primary safeguard. If you experience over-travel, stop the cutter at once. Do not operate it until the machine is properly repaired or adjusted. The knife could move downward without warning, causing sudden and serious injury. Improper repair or adjustment could cause sudden downward movement of the knife. There is another hazard with knife over-travel too. When the knife is improperly exposed below the clamp, a serious cut hazard exists with the exposed cutting edge of the knife. On many mechanically driven cutters, if you stop the knife in mid-cycle, the clamp will move up, leaving the knife exposed below it. Of course, these dangers will be avoided if your hands are out of the knife and clamp danger zone during actual operation. Knife bolt holes have also caused injury to cutter operators. Fingers, which should never be near the knife, have been caught in bolt holes during the cutting cycle and seriously injured. A cutter should not be operated if all knife bolts are not in place. It's a good idea to check your manual to locate all machine guards which are designed to protect you from moving parts other than the knife and clamp. On many models, the guards are removable. They are sometimes not replaced after maintenance or repair work. If any guards are missing, replace them before operating the cutter. Your manual will help you determine if any have been removed. The clamp is another known cause of injury to cutter operators. Clamp pressure, when controlled with a foot pedal or treadle, is adjustable on many machines. Because of the serious crush hazard, the clamp should operate with low pressure when controlled by the treadle. In other words, if your hands are free to inadvertently enter the danger zone when the clamp is treadle controlled, low clamp pressure may reduce the severity of injury to your hands or fingers if an accident occurs. However, you should always keep your hands clear of the knife clamp area until the clamp has returned and stopped. Fingers can be caught by the clamp and drawn up toward the knife, another serious cut hazard. If the clamp does not operate with low pressure when foot controlled, the cutter should be converted to low pressure operation immediately before further use. Be aware that if the cutter is not adjusted for low speed, low pressure treadle operation, current or future regulations may require two-hand operation of both a knife and clamp. Some older machines have exposed treadles. This presents another serious hazard. The treadle should be covered by a hood to prevent accidental operation of the clamp. Regulations may require it. Cutter controls have evolved through many changes over the years. Early single-lever machines were eventually replaced by double-lever models. These were replaced in time by two-hand start, one-hand hold control systems. New controls are equipped with two-hand start, two-hand hold mechanisms, also called constant pressure controls. These mechanisms require both hands to be in contact with the controls during the entire cutting cycle. If one hand is removed, the knife either stops its downward travel or returns to the up position. Unfortunately, there are reports that paper cutters with obsolete and unsafe controls are still in use, including single-lever machines. Cutters which do not require both hands to be away from the knife and clamp area during a cutting cycle are extremely hazardous and should never be operated. Federal regulations require all paper cutters to be equipped with two-hand constant pressure controls. It's known that some two-hand control systems have been modified to permit one hand to be free during the cutting cycle. Machines which permit one-hand freedom during cutting are a leading cause of serious personal injuries, and they may violate state or federal regulations. Experienced cutter operators sometimes feel constant pressure two-hand controls slow them down, particularly when working on an incentive pay basis. 31% of the machine-related injuries in the study I mentioned before involved operators working on an incentive basis. Don't ever be in too much of a hurry to work safely. Even experienced operators can be distracted or forget safe practices. Two-hand constant pressure controls will prevent you from paying a high price, fingers or a hand, for a simple mistake. Do not attempt to disconnect or get around the two-hand controls, ever. Do not permit anyone to rewire the controls to alter the two-hand constant pressure requirement, and never operate a cutter in which two-hand controls have been modified or circumvented. The government injury study revealed that operator attitude is definitely related to the cause of machine-related injuries. Unsafe acts like control bridging are foolish and dangerous. Some cutter operators attempt to bridge two-hand controls with a stick, 2x4, or other device to activate the cutting cycle with one hand. Bridging is a dangerous practice and should never be permitted. If it occurs, brackets, collars, or other anti-bridging devices should be installed around the control switches immediately. The few seconds of cycle delay time you may save by bridging is not worth the risk of a severe injury. For the same reason, no more than one person should be permitted in the cutter work area during operation. Anything which distracts your attention or which permits cutter operation with one hand should never be permitted. If you carefully observe the two-hand control rule, you should also be aware that there are reports of two-hand control mechanisms which malfunction due to age, wiring problems, and other causes. The fact that your cutter is equipped with proper controls doesn't mean you should rely totally on them. Never expose any part of your body to the knife and clamp area, even if you believe safety devices are engaged. Another procedure that causes operator injury is knife changing. Consult your cutter instruction manual to learn the manufacturer's recommended method of knife changing. Cutters made by different manufacturers may require different knife handling and changing methods. The fact that you are familiar with knife changing on one type of cutter doesn't mean that you know how to do the same thing safely on another machine. Read the manual carefully. If you have any questions, talk to your supervisor before attempting to handle the knife. Workplace conditions play an important part in safe cutter operation. Just as machine maintenance is important to safety, work area maintenance is also important. Before operating the cutter, be sure all trim, debris, tools, and foreign objects are cleaned away from the table. Never lay tools on the clamp. Check the floor to be sure it's free of trim, debris, grease, and oils. Anything that could cause you to slip or lose your balance during operation of the cutter is a definite hazard. Before turning the machine on, check to be sure your safety glasses are snug. Moving parts on the cutter can throw off debris with great force. Safety glasses will shield your eyes. This is another good reason to make sure no guards are missing from the machine. Make sure that you and anyone else who may operate the cutter understand all safety rules and procedures. It's a good idea to post them near the work area if possible. Keep your instruction manual in a handy place near the cutter for quick reference. Keep others away from the work area when the cutter is in operation. And never leave the machine, not even for a moment, when it is on. Turn the power off whenever you walk away from the work area. Tampering with controls or any part of the cutter must not be permitted. Major repairs or approved modifications should only be made by a qualified service technician. If your cutter is equipped with a treadle, keep feet away from it when handling stock near the clamp. A final word. If the cutter begins to make unusual sounds or operates abnormally, turn it off and check your manual. If you can't identify and easily correct the problem, notify your supervisor before continuing operation. If paper cutters are not properly maintained, they can cause injury. Every year, people are seriously injured while operating paper cutters. But injuries don't have to happen. It's up to you, the operator, to prevent them. Because of the variety of paper cutters in service today, I haven't reviewed every possible cutter hazard in this program. Every machine is different. Your cutter may, because of age, design, or abuse, present other injury hazards. If you think your actions through carefully, use common sense, and operate the cutter as though it could fail at any moment, you'll have a better chance of injury-free operation. And remember, 65% of injuries studied involved experienced operators. Don't depend on your paper cutter to protect you from injury. Depend on yourself. The ultimate responsibility is in your hands.